Welcome to episode 2 of Between the Generations. Today's episode is focused on the energy sector, specifically renewables, and we will obviously touch on climate change, of course. This time it's not just me and Dad, but we have the pleasure of welcoming Angie Needle and Ella Mester to the podcast. So, welcome, guys. Before I do a short intro, do you want to just introduce yourselves quickly? Angie.
Hi there, and thanks for having me. It's brilliant to be here. I'm Angie Needle. I'm the strategy director at Cadent. Cadent's a gas network. I've spent most of my career in energy and climate change roles.
Amazing. And Ella?
So, hi, I'm Ella, and I studied environmental science and graduated from university with them. And I currently work in Cornwall as the communications and impact coordinator for a small company called Communities for Renewables.
Amazing. So, a little short intro from me before we get on with the questions. I think me and Dad were really keen to have one of our first episodes be on energy and the transition to a renewable energy mix, as it's such a critical part of getting to net zero and fundamentally achieving most of the hefty goals associated with tackling the climate crisis. Interestingly, in the news, they're reporting a noticeable lack of action on climate change, and progress towards the ambitious targets is not being made at the rate needed. So there's lots that needs to be done, but also a lot of positive action to hear about. So let's get into it. I'll hand over to Dad for the first question.
Thanks, Em. So, Angie, you mentioned there that most of your career has been spent in the world of kind of carbon and energy. Is that always what you wanted to do? And I guess, do you feel that you've achieved the goals that you set out when you first kind of entered the career?
Oh, it's a lovely question about goals. So, I did an environmental science degree, and I always cared very much, and still do, about leaving the planet in a slightly better place than when I arrived, right? And that means from a biodiversity point of view, I love nature and love plants. And that's actually why I joined the water sector to begin with, because it felt like it was genuinely connected to all those things. But as I developed my career there, I ended up being more of an energy professional, sort of saving kilowatt hours and making sure we can do those in a low fossil fuel way. And actually, one of the reasons why I joined Cadent, which is a gas network, is because I can help from the inside of a big infrastructure company that basically delivers fossil fuels for a living, right? And we need to sort of make that different. Have I achieved all my goals? Well, I'm not really a goal setting kind of person. And that's not to say I don't want to have impact. I absolutely do. So every day I want to have the end of the day where I've had impact. I can see the difference that we're making as a sector, and I'm really very driven. But personal goals are slightly different from organizational goals. And I have a definite view that I want to be successful in supporting, decarbonisation. And I want to do that in the best way that I can and help others do it too. But I think I'm quite broad in terms of goal definition. I'm not sort of, career seeking from that point of view.
That's really interesting, actually, because I always anticipate, people who have reached a certain level of seniority in their roles are kind of very goal driven, and I thought I was always the kind of odd one out that kind of, I say yes to lots of things, but I don't necessarily set the target that's what I wanted to say yes to. So it's comforting for me to know that
Yeah.
I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ella, you are a recent graduate, so why did you choose to get into the energy sector, and what are your career aspirations and goals moving forward?
Yeah, so like Angie, I studied environmental science, and I always knew I wanted to have a job tackling climate change, and I also knew I wanted a job where I could see firsthand the impact of my work, because coming out of university, I just wanted to be really motivated. And energy is one of the most important sectors if we want to meet our national net zero targets and transition towards a low carbon economy. So in my final year, I saw an opportunity and I reached out to a local community energy group called the Weybridge Renewable Energy Network. And they introduced me to kind of the concept of community energy, which is still quite niche. I'd never really heard of it at university. And then a few months later, at the end, just before we graduated, I came across a job ad for Communities for Renewables, actually on the day of the deadline. And luckily I applied, and I was fortunate enough to hear back from them. And now, yeah, I'm 9 months into my first job in the energy sector, and I'm really enjoying it. I don't really know what my career aspirations are yet. I'm just kind of taking it day by day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because obviously I've not found my first job in the sector yet, and for you to already be 9 months in and in such an interesting company, especially down in Cornwall,
Yeah.
it's really interesting to have that insight into the industry. Yeah. To both of you, what are the biggest challenges you think that the industry are facing in the need to combat the climate crisis? Sort of thinking about things like legislation, investment behaviours, etc. Big question.
Yeah. Shall I go first? Have a
Yeah,
go?
you
go
first.
It's this is a huge question, right? So unfortunately, focus on things like net zero and energy, ebbs and flows, depending on prosperity, if I'm honest. And you might have heard of the energy trilemma. So you've basically got, in order to sort of progress, you've got to sort of reduce your carbon emissions. It's got to be affordable, and you've got to do it in a resilient and reliable way, right? And the energy system in the UK is reliant, and has been for a while, on natural gas, right? When it's not windy, gas makes electricity, and we're moving away from, we've gone from coal to natural gas, and we go from natural gas to renewables, and it's a completely new energy system. And that completely new energy system, the electricity system today, is tiny, right? All the washing machines and the lights and things that we use, and it's a third of the size of the gas system. So if we're shifting the gas system to an electricity system, the electricity system's got to be 3 times bigger, and it's got to have something that steps in when it's not windy. Right, and guess what? That is all going to cost money. And the challenge is we've got to take the country with us, who haven't got any money right now. Let's really be honest, people are really struggling, and whatever you do, it's going to cost money. And so what we need from government, because it's not all just industry, is you need some certainty of targets. We need them to be fixed. We need them not to change, which creates certainty so that it can drive investment into some big long-term infrastructure. And I genuinely believe that if we focus on the big infrastructure and education, because there's a big gap between what people think causes climate change and what actually does, and that will make a really big difference. And that's what I spend my life talking about, as you can tell.
I guess building on what Angie said, one of the major problems that I've come across, we work mainly with solar, so it's decentralized renewable energy, and there's just a huge backlog of projects waiting for grid connections because of the infrastructure. And we're trying to work towards this target of net zero by 2050, but it's really hard to actually get projects in the pipeline at the pace we need to reach the targets. And yeah, I'm only a few months in, and I've already found it's ridiculously difficult. So I can imagine that it's quite frustrating if you're 30 years and still facing, these kind of issues.
Yeah, but the issues are progressive, right?
Yeah.
We're finding issues that we didn't know would exist like a few years ago. And the fact that the connections queue for grid connections, actually the end of the queue is closer to 2050 than it is to today, which is a sad truth. But it's a problem to solve. And what I do know about the UK is that we're really good at problem solving. We're brilliant engineers, and there's lots of different solutions to help us get to net zero. And that's why I worry about obsession with single technologies. Like, there's going to be a range of things. There's a range of things today. And that's actually why I work on hydrogen, because it's going to be a slice of the pie, as will nuclear, as will renewables, as will lots of other things, biomass and the like. So I think, my encouragement of us all is to be as well read in the energy sector as you can, and not be competitive with different technologies. Think about them as a whole system, because they all work together. And I know I'm asking for the moon on a stick, but that means it helps because you realise that through joint endeavour you can get a bit further than you would do if you all stuck to your bit, which in most cases makes somebody money down the line. And that's one of the other things which is a sticking issue, is that if everybody just talks about their bit because their business, you know, makes money out of it, that's a challenge.
Yeah, if I can jump in there and just, so I'm really with you on that kind of issue, or the complexity we've got with people with a small amount of knowledge perhaps being quite a dangerous thing, and thinking one way of, you know, their way of delivering against the solution is the only way, or is the right way. And I'm quite I've got to be careful how I say this. I'm a vision-led person. I'm not claiming to be a visionary. I'm a vision-led person. I like to see a picture painted of what are we trying to get to. So what does good look like in 2050? So can I ask you both, Angie, I'll start with you. Can you paint us a bit of a picture? You've kind of alluded to it, but what will good, really good, look like in terms of an energy mix and our relationship with energy, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, good question. So because energy's been cheap, actually, decades ago, there's a huge amount of investment, isn't there, needed? So I would like, if I imagine I'm in 2050, I'd expect to have better insulated homes, everybody with some kind of smart device that can help them manage their energy, such that they're really, you know, getting value out of the energy that they either make themselves. You know, every home is going to be a power station, every water company is going to be a power station. You know, you're going to have energy coming from distributed sources. You will still need, though, resilience built in. And that is because all these things don't work. And actually, the more distributed they are, the less reliable they can be. So you're going to have something that gives people confidence that we're not going to have power cuts, blackouts. You know, you are going to have a different energy system that underpins this. But I also would like us to, you know, like a few years ago, nobody really had mobile phones and they didn't know what a gigabyte was. I really want people to think about energy. Like, people know what megabytes and gigabytes. Why don't they know kilowatts and megawatts? Why have we made it so complicated? So I think the language of energy needs sort of normalizing, and by which I think it needs to be taught in schools, because it isn't, in the same way that we need to teach kids how to do tax returns. But I think there's definitely we will get to 2050. It'll be hard work, there'll be money needs to be spent, and you know, the country's going to have to pay for it one way or the other. But we're definitely leading in the UK, and I think we should be very proud of that.
That's really interesting. What you say there, there's, you know, it's not rocket science, is it? Some of this stuff, it's some really simple stuff, and I must admit, I can't get round the question that's in my head. Working in a business that, you know, has set a net zero target, we know we're going to need to offset, you know, a certain amount of that carbon, despite, you know, all the fantastic efforts we've got in reducing our energy. And that point of insulation, why is that? You know, why have we not got some system where companies who are going to want to offset carbon in the UK are able to fund, you know, general public in a cost of living crisis to either be generating their own electricity or insulating their homes? But that's probably a question for another podcast. Yeah. So Ella, you're right in the, you know, you're kind of dealing at the hard end of it, talking with communities. So what's the vision that you've got for 2050?
I mean, I think when you're at university, you're always talking about big challenges, looking really like holistically, and you're talking about everything on a global level. But what I've really liked about working here at Communities for Renewables is you get to look at all different issues to do with climate change and energy on such a local scale. So you're looking at, you know, fuel poverty reduction schemes and seeing the direct impact of the schemes with the local community that you're working with. So I think making sure as we move forward, you have the consensus of local communities and you're taking the community with you, as opposed to, you know, making changes really quickly and it's not equitable. I think focusing as much on climate justice and a just transition as much as you focus on climate change mitigation is important. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I think you're right, at uni everything is so big and you're just looking at things like the SDGs always and massive targets and international goals. And then when you, I mean, even just moving into your own flat and like you said, Angie, figuring out your energy bill, and it comes, with all these words and jargon and a breakdown of things. I did a geography degree and I don't understand it all. So I think it's really important to, the more people can understand things, the more you can work towards a goal. And there's so many people in different organizations working from within or outside trying to get to the same goal of net zero, but the more people can understand, the more people can work towards that. And sort of linked to that, I mean, you've both touched on it a bit, but are there any specific actions you think we need to reach the vision, whether that be net zero or a more just sort of energy society? Ella, start with you this time.
Big question, Em. I think, we talk about this a lot, but having the legislation in place to back all these big ideas that people in the industry are talking about. Didn't you say today there's been a new piece of legislation about climate injustice?
Yeah, I think they've just put through that climate injustice can now be considered a human rights violation. So that's something really interesting, I guess, on a more global level. To sort of, I need to have a look at it, to be honest, because I'm really interested in that.
I think what I think from I'm going to talk about hydrogen, if that's okay, because that's my bag. Yeah. That's what I spend most of my time working on at the moment. And so because renewables and renewable power generation is intermittent, and currently a natural gas steps in and it's storable and you can save gas molecules for a long time, it is going to serve a role in a 2050 or a net zero future whenever we achieve it. And so I've been focused on trying to get the hydrogen economy going in the UK, not just because we can make hydrogen in the UK, but we could become a global leader in hydrogen skills, capabilities, engineering that we could export elsewhere. And we've missed the boat a bit in the UK because we didn't take advantage of wind. We're not the producers of wind turbines. We're not the producers of batteries. It would be quite nice because we're pretty good at engineering in the UK, as I've mentioned already. So, what we need to make hydrogen an official thing, because you won't get to net zero without it, is government policy that supports bigger numbers than they've got today. So they've only got 10 gigawatts of production target by 2030. That's good. It's a good start. It's not enough. And we don't have real plans to build the networks and the storage needed to move the hydrogen to where it's needed to go. And guess what? There's pipes in the ground already that could do that. So that would be nice if we could reuse those. And then how do you create the pull for using hydrogen? So I really would like us to consider integrating hydrogen in the same way that we have done renewable electricity, which is create like a green gas certification scheme that anybody anywhere can buy green gas, could be hydrogen or biomethane, and get the benefit from doing so, regardless of whether they actually receive that gas in their pipes or not, because we're all one big connected system. And that means that you can make hydrogen in the best place. And for those who don't know, you have to split water into hydrogen and oxygen with renewable electricity, or you take it out of natural gas and store the CO2. There's a few other ways of making it, to be honest with you. I've even heard of natural hydrogen where you can collect it from underground. So there's different technologies in development, but in order to start it going, we kind of need a bigger R&D budget, more innovation, more education to get people to want to work in the gas sector. Let me just tell you, it's fascinating. So, if anybody's interested, let me know. Yeah.
I like what you said about, I think it was earlier you said about it being like a piece of the pie, because that's such a good way to look at it, because there's so much focus on things like solar and renewables that are really, green, but then to have hydrogen be a big part of it, and especially in the UK, I think for young people coming into the industry looking to work towards net zero targets, it'd be an amazing place for more innovation, definitely.
And if you think about the jobs of the future, I mean, solar and renewables and wind, all that stuff, absolutely, we need spades of it. But we need people who can connect things up. We need
definitely
the infrastructure, we need the engineers, we need the educators, the communities. Because I think a lot of people think that net zero is about engineers. It is a bit, but it's not in its entirety. And I've spent quite a lot of my time trying to explain to people that the sector needs lots more folks in addition to all the engineers. And it's a wonderful place to have a career in the utility sector, because we do so much. Like the country doesn't happen right without us doing our jobs. We make everything, connect, so it is really worthwhile.
Yeah, very correct. I think people forget that. I mean, things like the water company and the utility, well, together, the utility sector does keep the country running. And I think people are very quick to complain rather than think of everything good that you guys do. So kind of moving away from energy a little bit, Angie, you also helped found the Women's Utility Network. So I just wanted to ask a bit sort of why you did that, where the ideas came from, and is it having success?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm really proud of the Women's Utility Network. We set it up quite a few years ago now, I can't even remember. And it was back when I worked at British Gas, and it was really driven from a place where I've spent most of my career in different organisations where women are a minority. And we shouldn't really apologise for that. It's just the history of the sectors. They're male or male sort of orientated sectors, historically that way. And what we saw as a small group of us from all different companies is that there were measures being put in place to get women on boards, which was brilliant. There was nothing in between that really helped women develop their careers within the sector, and so that they could flourish and thrive whatever level they wanted to get to. Because I think there was an expectation that if you were going to be a senior woman in the energy sector, you had to be on the board, and therefore, if you didn't want to be a board member, then don't bother. That is not the case at all. And what I do know is that a diversity of people creates diversity of thinking, which creates better outcomes, and that is known worldwide. So the women's utility sector was just driven by volunteers, and all we did in the first instance was get the women together to help each other. That's literally it. What can we do to get women of all ages, or whatever career levels, helping each other out in different sectors that are all related to utilities? We're now sponsored by lots of different companies. We've had to employ people. We put on events, and it's really about what women need to help them with their careers. And we've done a lot of it's fascinating, a lot of the work that we do is about confidence, actually, more than anything else. Because women, we dumb ourselves down a little bit more than the chaps do. Not universal. And we've grown a bit of an allyship with some of the boys as well, because it's not just about girls helping girls, it's who else can support the sector. And so I think it will just keep going. We just keep doing it until it's equal, which it is not.
I'll just jump in and say I'm an ally.
Yeah, well, I know you are.
I think I'm speaking at a conference in Birmingham later on this month. Brilliant. Alongside some of your water utility, women's utility network colleagues. So yeah, it's I'm not saying that as a kind of a comedy interject. It's really important that men come forward as well and say, yeah, no, it's incredibly important. And you're absolutely right. It's about making that connection between the kind of all levels of the company and demonstrating that there's, there absolutely should be equal opportunities for all throughout your career. And it's down to you to decide when, when you take a rest in your career, when you put your foot down on the pedal. It's totally up to you.
Yeah. And there's loads of different jobs in our sector. As I said before, we love our female engineers, but there's way more than just those things too. And I'm really proud that at Cadent we're really bothered about ED&I in general, and it does make for a significantly more entertaining and interesting company when you've got lots of different folks there.
Definitely. I feel really privileged. I think obviously it's not equal yet, but I mean, while me and Ella are at university, our course was equal, if not more, girls, I think. And then, yeah, to have things like the Women's Utility Network as we enter the, you know, world of work, it just makes it a lot more easy, and yeah, adds a bit of confidence, I think. So
I do think it's, sorry, I don't mean to, I do think it's worth mentioning though that the network does free mentoring for women.
Oh.
So you should both, and anybody else listening, contact the Women's Utility Network. By the way, the whole point of it is it's free for women.
That is amazing.
We don't expect anybody to be out of pocket. But it's the companies who are, you know, paying for the events and things. But we've got a mentoring program, and you can find a mentor you like the sound of them, see if they're available. And it just opens your eyes to different folks in different sectors. So we welcome everybody.
It's so nice to hear that, because obviously I've only just started my career, but from what I've seen so far, like, my team is male dominated. All of the community energy groups we work with, the majority of those boards are male dominated as well. And it does just affect your confidence slightly, and it's no one's fault, but when you are the odd one out and you're the only young woman on a project, it's hard just to not doubt yourself. So knowing that there's like a support network of women that you can go to, even if it is just for a little bit of confidence, and to know there's other people in the same boat, it's really encouraging. Yeah. You've done a great thing, Angie. I'm definitely going to have a look.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant. So we're kind of coming towards the end of our allotted time, but the podcast is called Between the Generations, and part of what Em and I are trying to do is kind of look at the look at the opportunities and the ability to support each other, just as you were saying, Angie, across generations, because the challenges that we face are so great that, you know, we all need to be involved in delivering those, and it's still going to take some time. So as someone who's in a senior position at the moment, Angie, what are you looking for from the generation coming through and you wanting to join either the Women's Utility Network or you know, Cadent, and what's your advice to them?
There's a few things. So first of all, I think it's a brilliant thing that you're doing on this podcast, so well done. It's quite brave, isn't it, and a bit scary as well. So well, that's good, right? So doing brave, scary things is what makes things happen. So when we set up the Women's Utility Network, we had literally no idea, you know, what was going to happen. But unless you try stuff, you're never going to know. And if you see something that doesn't feel right and you want to do something about it, I would encourage everybody to do something about it themselves rather than expect somebody else to do it. I do think it's important that you drive yourself. And that, you know, from a career point of view, network the hell out of it. You know, it is really about being well read, understanding people, listening well, really do take some time out of your, because when you get your new jobs, you know, you'll be all busy doing that and you'll forget actually there is an outside world and there are other people who can help you outside of your first organizations and things. And I think that really matters. And then lastly, all I would say is that I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she'll be looking to you for her career's advice, right? Because I'm too old now. You know, we're in a different planet, you know. So, don't pull the ladder up behind you. You like always help, you know, those who are following in your footsteps.
Fantastic advice. Yeah.
I like that. A good question to end on, Dad.
That's good. Well, do you want to wrap it up and then?
Yeah. Well, thank you both for such an interesting conversation, and it's been lovely to have you on the podcast. Thank you for bearing with us while we're still figuring it all out.
Been brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I've learned a lot.
That's great. That 30 minutes has kind of absolutely flown by, and we really appreciated having you on there. And yeah, we're still working out the next few episodes, but we're hoping the next episode is going to be on biodiversity, the natural environment, nature-based solutions. So keep an eye out for that. And I think it's worth sharing. We had some really nice feedback from people who listened to the podcast the first time round. A small and exclusive kind of audience, but quite a powerful one, which is fantastic. So if you're listening to this, please do share it with anyone you think might find it useful and interesting. But yeah, thanks again, Angie. Thanks again, Ella. That's been brilliant. Lovely to speak to you both, and Angie, lovely to catch up with you. And Em, brilliant hosting. Thank you very much.
Ignore my headset.
We'll look forward to speaking to you all again in the next episode. Thanks very much.